Have you ever wondered how ChatGPT understands human language? How YouTube knows exactly what video you want to watch next? Or how Google Maps predicts traffic perfectly? The secret behind all these technologies is artificial intelligence. But AI is a broad term. Inside AI, we have machine learning, and inside that, deep learning. Think of traditional programming like giving a computer a recipe to bake a cake. You write the rules, feed the data, and get an answer. But machine learning is fundamentally different. It's like teaching a child. We give the computer the data and the final answers, and it learns the rules itself. Instead of hard-coding logic, we let the machine discover the hidden patterns. This isn't just theory, it's running the modern world. When Netflix recommends a movie, that's machine learning analyzing your watch history. When Spotify builds your Discover Weekly, when Amazon suggests a product, or when Gmail accurately filters out a scam email, that is ML in action. It's powering Tesla's self-driving cars by scanning the environment, helping doctors with early medical diagnosis through X-rays, identifying faces on your phone, and blocking fraudulent credit card transactions in milliseconds. Machine learning is no longer the future, it is the invisible engine of the present. But a machine can't learn without fuel. That fuel is data. And there is a golden rule in data science: garbage in, garbage out. If you feed an algorithm bad data, you get bad predictions. Data comes in many forms: structured data like Excel and SQL databases, semi-structured like JSON from APIs, and unstructured like images, audio, and social media text. We collect this from IoT sensors, hospital records, website clicks, and cloud data lakes. The more diverse and high quality your data collection, the smarter your AI will eventually become. Let's visualize a dataset. Imagine a spreadsheet for house price prediction. The rows represent individual houses. The columns represent characteristics, like square footage, bedrooms, and age. We call these columns features or independent variables. The specific column we are trying to predict, the price, is our label, target, or dependent variable. If our label is a continuous number, like price, it's a regression dataset. If our label is a category, like spam or not spam, it's a classification dataset. Once we have a dataset, we never show all of it to our model at once. That would be like giving a student the exam paper before the test. Instead, we split it. 80% goes to the training data so the model can study and learn. 10% goes to validation data to act as a practice quiz, helping us tune the model's settings. Finally, the remaining 10% is locked away as testing data, the final exam to check if our model can generalize its learning to completely unseen, real-world data. Raw data is incredibly messy. Before training, we must perform data preprocessing. We handle missing values by deleting rows or imputing average numbers. We remove duplicate records and filter out extreme outliers that act as noise. Finally, we scale the data using normalization, scaling 0 to 1, or standardization, centering around a mean of 0. This prevents a feature with massive numbers, like salary, from completely overpowering a feature with small numbers, like age. Next is feature engineering, the art of extracting the best signals from your data. This involves feature selection, where we drop useless columns. It involves one-hot encoding, which converts text categories into binary ones and zeros so the math algorithms can process them. We can extract days of the week from raw dates, clean noisy text, or combine columns to create powerful new polynomial features. A model is only as good as the features you engineer for it. Let's map out the complete machine learning pipeline. It always starts with collect data. Next, we clean the data. Then we apply feature engineering. Fourth, we perform the train-test split. Fifth, we choose an algorithm suited for the task. Sixth, we train the model on the data. Seventh, we evaluate its performance using metrics. Eighth, we tune its hyperparameters to improve accuracy. Finally, we deploy the model to the real world, monitor it, and eventually retrain it with new data. How do we choose an algorithm? It depends on the type of machine learning. We have 5 main paradigms. Supervised learning, where we have labeled answers. Unsupervised learning, where we have no labels and seek hidden patterns. Reinforcement learning, where an agent learns via trial and error. Semi-supervised learning, a hybrid using a few labels to tag massive unlabeled datasets. And self-supervised learning, where the data acts as its own label, the secret behind modern large language models. Let's dive into supervised learning. Think of this as learning with a teacher. The data comes with explicit labels. We know the correct answer for every historical example. It is broken into 2 main branches: regression, where we predict a continuous numerical value like temperature or stock price, and classification, where we predict a discrete category, like identifying if a patient is sick or healthy. Our first algorithm is linear regression. Imagine a scatter plot of house sizes versus prices. Linear regression attempts to draw the single, best fit line straight through the middle of these points. Mathematically, it uses the formula y is equal to mx plus b, calculating the slope and intercept to minimize the loss, which is the distance between the line and the actual data points. It is incredibly fast and interpretable, making it perfect for baseline predictions, but it struggles with complex, nonlinear relationships. But what if we want to classify emails as spam or not spam? We can't use a straight line. We use logistic regression. Despite its name, this is a classification algorithm. It wraps the linear equation in a sigmoid function, which transforms any number into a probability between 0 and 1. We then draw a decision boundary at 0.5. It's the industry standard for binary classification, fast, reliable, and easily explainable, though it assumes our data is linearly separable. If the data is more complex, we use a decision tree. Imagine a flowchart that asks a series of yes-no questions. Is income $50,000? Is age 25? It splits the data mathematically using concepts like entropy and Gini impurity, aiming to make the resulting groups as pure as possible until it reaches the final predictions, called leaf nodes. Trees capture nonlinear relationships beautifully and require almost no data scaling. However, their biggest limitation is that they easily memorize the data, becoming incredibly overfit. How do we fix an overfit tree? We build a random forest. Imagine asking a single doctor for a complex diagnosis, they might be biased. But if you ask 100 doctors and take a majority vote, you get a highly robust answer. Random forest uses an ensemble technique called bagging to train hundreds of diverse decision trees on random subsets of data and features. It provides incredible accuracy, resists overfitting, and even tells us which features are most important. Let's pivot to Naive Bayes, a brilliant algorithm built on conditional probability. Imagine a spam detector analyzing word frequencies. It calculates the probability of an email being spam given that it contains the word lottery. It's called naive because it assumes every feature is completely independent of the others. Despite this naive assumption, it is blazing fast, scales perfectly to massive text datasets, and is heavily used for document classification and sentiment analysis. Support vector machines, or SVMs, are the masters of drawing boundaries. Imagine two clusters of data points. SVM doesn't just draw any line, it draws a hyperplane that achieves the maximum margin of separation between the two classes. The data points closest to the line are the support vectors. And if the data cannot be separated by a straight line, SVM uses the brilliant kernel trick to project the data into a higher dimension where a straight line suddenly works perfectly. K-nearest neighbors, or KNN, takes a radically different approach. It doesn't actually train a mathematical model at all. When a new data point arrives, KNN looks at its k closest neighbors in the training data by calculating the Euclidean distance. It then takes a majority vote to classify the new point. It's wonderfully intuitive, like assuming a person's interests based on their closest friends. However, calculating the distance to every single point makes it very slow on massive datasets. If Random Forest is a team of independent doctors, boosting is a single student who takes a test, reviews their mistakes, and then takes it again, specifically focusing on what they got wrong. Algorithms like gradient boosting, XGBoost, LightGBM, and CatBoost train trees sequentially, where each new tree corrects the mathematical errors, the gradients, of the previous ones. XGBoost is widely considered the king of tabular data, dominating Kaggle competitions worldwide. When data becomes unstructured, like images or audio, we turn to neural networks. Inspired by the human brain, they consist of an input layer, multiple hidden layers, and an output layer of artificial neurons. Data flows through these layers, multiplying by weights and adding biases, passing through nonlinear activation functions. They are incredibly data-hungry and computationally expensive, but they are the undisputed champions of image recognition, speech translation, and systems like ChatGPT. What happens when our data has absolutely no labels? This is unsupervised learning. The goal is no longer prediction, it is pattern discovery. Imagine a supermarket wanting to segment its millions of customers into distinct marketing groups, but without knowing what those groups are in advance. The algorithm must explore the data structure on its own to find the hidden clusters. The most famous unsupervised algorithm is k-means clustering. We tell it to find k groups. It randomly drops k center points, called centroids, into the data. It assigns every data point to its closest centroid, then recalculates the centroid's position to the true center of the new group. Through rapid iterations, the centroids shift until they lock into the optimal clusters. It's the industry standard for customer segmentation and document grouping. K-means forces you to guess the number of clusters. Hierarchical clustering solves this by building a massive tree-like structure called a dendrogram. It starts by treating every single data point as its own cluster and slowly merges the closest ones together, step by step, until only one giant cluster remains. By cutting the dendrogram at a specific height, you can visually decide the perfect number of groupings. K-means assumes clusters are spherical, which fails on weirdly shaped data. DBSCAN fixes this by grouping data based on density. It explores continuous chains of tightly packed data points. If a point is sitting completely alone in a low-density area, DBSCAN beautifully isolates it as an outlier. This makes it exceptionally powerful for anomaly and credit card fraud detection. Sometimes datasets have thousands of columns, which crashes computers and prevents visualization. Principal Component Analysis, or PCA, is a dimensionality reduction technique. Imagine shining a flashlight on a 3D object to create a 2D shadow that still retains the object's core shape. PCA mathematically squashes hundreds of highly correlated features down into just 2 or 3 uncorrelated principal components, compressing the data while preserving the most vital variance. While PCA is great for mathematical compression, it often fails at separating complex, nonlinear clusters visually. Enter TSNE. It calculates the probabilities of data points being neighbors in high-dimensional space and then meticulously arranges them in a 2D map to perfectly preserve those local relationships. It creates visually stunning, distinct islands of data, making it a favorite for visualizing genetic data and deep learning embeddings. How does Amazon know that people who buy a camera also buy a memory card? They use association rules via the a priori algorithm. Also known as market basket analysis, it scans millions of shopping carts to find items that are frequently bought together. It calculates support, confidence, and lift metrics to generate powerful if-then rules, driving product recommendations across the internet. Reinforcement learning completely changes the game. There is no dataset. Instead, an agent learns by interacting with an environment. It observes its current state, takes an action, and receives either a positive reward or a negative penalty. Using algorithms like Q-learning and deep Q networks, the agent updates its internal policy through millions of episodes to maximize its total reward. This is how AI learns to master chess, beat video games, and teach robots how to walk. In the real world, labeling data is extremely expensive. Medical experts don't have time to label a million X-rays. Semi-supervised learning takes a tiny dataset of 1,000 labeled X-rays, trains a base model, and uses it to generate pseudolabels for the remaining 999,000 unlabeled X-rays. The model then retrains on the massive combined dataset, achieving state-of-the-art accuracy with a fraction of the human effort. The true modern powerhouse is self-supervised learning. Here, the data generates its own labels. Imagine taking a massive sentence, masking out a single word, and forcing the neural network to predict that missing word. By doing this billions of times across the entire internet, models like BERT and GPT learn the underlying grammar, facts, and reasoning of human language without a single human annotator. So how does a model mathematically learn? First, it randomly initializes its weights. It makes a forward pass prediction, which initially is terrible. It calculates the loss, the mathematical error of that prediction. Then, using calculus, a process called backpropagation figures out exactly how much each weight contributed to the error. An optimizer, like gradient descent, gently updates the weights step by step. Over hundreds of epochs, the model rolls down the mountain of error until it reaches perfect convergence. We must evaluate our models rigorously. For regression, we use mean absolute error, MAE, mean squared error, MSE, and R-squared. For classification, accuracy isn't enough. In a hospital, missing a sick patient, a false negative, is fatal. So we use a confusion matrix to calculate precision, recall, and the F1 score. We also plot the ROC curve and measure the AUC to test the model's true diagnostic power. The greatest enemy in machine learning is overfitting. Imagine a student who simply memorized the textbook word for word but fails the final exam because they didn't actually understand the concepts. An overfit model has high variance, it memorized the noise in the training data and fails miserably in the real world. We combat this using regularization techniques that force the model to stay simple and robust. The opposite problem is underfitting. This is a student who didn't study at all. The model has high bias. It is far too simple to capture the underlying patterns in the data. Using a straight linear line to predict complex parabolic data results in underfitting. The solution? Increase the model's complexity or provide it with much richer features. This creates the ultimate balancing act in data science, the bias-variance trade-off. As you make a model more complex, bias goes down, but variance goes up. Our ultimate goal is generalization, finding that perfect mathematical sweet spot where the model is complex enough to understand the patterns, but constrained enough to ignore the noise. Training a model in a Jupyter notebook is just the beginning. The final step is model deployment. We wrap our model in an API using frameworks like FastAPI, containerize it using Docker, and push it to cloud platforms like AWS, Azure, or GCP. But the job isn't done. Data in the real world constantly shifts. We must utilize CI/CD pipelines to monitor the model's performance and automatically retrain it when its accuracy drifts. What a journey! We started by contrasting traditional programming with the data-driven world of machine learning. We mastered data collection, train test splits, and pre-processing. We explored the vast landscapes of supervised prediction, unsupervised clustering, and reinforcement trial and error. We walked through powerful algorithms like random forests and SVMs, understood the calculus of backpropagation, balanced bias and variance, and finally deployed our intelligence to the cloud. You now have a complete, foundational map of the entire machine learning universe. But the frontier of AI does not stop here. In our next lesson, we are leaving traditional algorithms behind and diving entirely into deep learning. We will build artificial neural networks from scratch, explore convolutional networks for computer vision, recurrent networks for time series, and the revolutionary transformer architectures that power large language models like ChatGPT. Subscribe, keep exploring, and I'll see you in the next class.